Robert Baratheon's death shook the entire realm of Westeros. In King's Landing, mourning filled the halls, but more than grief, there was fear because the fight for the crown had officially begun. But in this alternate tale, things didn't unfold the way history remembers. In this version of fate, Eddard Starklord of Winterfell, Warden of the North, and the most honorable man in the Seven Kingdoms chose to wear the crown. Against his own principles, against the whispers of his ancestors, and under the pressure of chaos and secrets, Ned Stark became king. It wasn't an easy decision. The revelation that Joffrey was not Robert's true son, the suspicious death of Jon Arryn, and Robert's fatal injury in the Huntlevet came too quickly. Ned had written to Stannis Baratheon, urging him to claim his rightful place as heir, but Stannis had not yet marched. The Lannisters moved faster. Cersei was preparing to place Joffrey on the throne by force. So when the lords of the realm looked to Ned for leadership, he saw no other path. He took the throne not for ambition, but for survival. His first act as king was to summon the small council. He made it clear Joffrey would not be king, and the truth of his birth could not be denied any longer. Varys watched with unreadable eyes. Littlefinger smirked in his corner, and Pycelle trembled, unsure whom to support. Ned declared himself protector of the realm and king in Robert's name, to safeguard peace until the truth could be delivered to all great houses. The North rejoiced, but King's Landing trembled. Cersei Lannister was furious. She had tried to seduce Ned into silence, offered gold, alliance, anything to keep Joffrey's claim alive. But now her children were labelled bastards, born of incest, and her power was crumbling. She fled the Red Keep with Jaime and Tyrion, seeking refuge in Casterly Rock, rallying the Lannister bannermen to prepare for war. She whispered in ears that Ned had stolen the crown, that he murdered Robert, that the North wanted to conquer the South. In the meantime, Ned sent for his daughters. Sansa and Arya were placed under heavy guard, no longer political pawns, but daughters of the king. Arya hated the tight corridors of the Red Keep, while Sansa wept for the golden-haired prince, who no longer spoke her name. Word of Ned's coronation spread like wildfire. Renly Baratheon, Robert's youngest brother, refused to accept Ned's rule and declared himself king with the support of House Tyrell. Meanwhile, Stannis, cold and rigid, saw Ned's crown as a betrayal. He marched from Dragonstone with a burning fury, dragging Melisandre's red fire and her talk of kings and gods behind him. The realm fractured, but Ned held the center. He reinstated the Night's Watch funding, brought law back to the city, and forced corrupt lords to answer for their crimes. He tried to rule as he lived with honor, but honor in King's Landing is a curse. Behind closed doors, Littlefinger plotted to turn the people against him. The gold cloaks grew restless. Food ran short. Whispers of rebellion echoed in the streets. Ned had taken the crown, but had he taken the people? And then came the letter from Daenerys Targaryen across the narrow sea. She had dragons, she had armies, and she knew the wolf now sat on the throne. The game had changed. Would Ned Stark, King of the Seven Kingdoms, be able to keep it? The days that followed Ned Stark's coronation were a storm wrapped in silence. The Iron Throne, once a symbol of fire and blood, now felt colder, more northern. He refused the golden robes, the rich feasts, the excess. He sat in court wearing his grey cloak of Winterfell, sword ice always beside him, and his gaze steady like a frozen lake. But peace does not last in a kingdom built on secrets. From the east, ravens arrived with a royal seal. Stannis Baratheon had declared war. He called Ned a traitor, a usurper, a man who'd betrayed both king and gods. He marched from Dragonstone with ships, knights, and a red priestess who promised victory through flames. The one true king rides with fire, the letter said. Ned, read it twice, but he did not tremble. Instead, he summoned his bannermen, sending ravens north, south, and across the Vale. He knew this war would not be like the rebellion of Robert. This was not about one king falling. This was about a kingdom splitting at its spine. And yet, within the walls of the Red Keep, Ned faced a battle of a different kind. Politics. Littlefinger stayed, pretending loyalty, offering smiles laced with poison. Varys whispered truths that never felt whole. Pycelle, ever a servant of power, shifted like smoke. But it was Arya who saw it first. She had taken to hiding in the walls again, running with the street rats, listening when no one thought she would. One night she returned to her father cheeks, pale eyes burning. "They're going to kill you," she said. In the council room, Petyr and Pycelle, they said they'll make it look like sickness. Ned felt something twist inside him, not fear, but recognition. This city was built to swallow men like him, and he had thought wearing a crown might protect him. He acted swiftly. Pycelle was arrested that very night, dragged screaming from his chambers. His chambers were filled with raven feathers and letters addressed to Casterly Rock. Littlefinger vanished before he could be taken, with the conspiracy exposed. Ned tightened his grip. He installed Seer Barristan, Selmyr's hand, a man of honor, who shared his vision of justice. And he sent word to Robb Stark, summoning the young Wolf South to support the crown. But as the wolves howled, the lions roared louder. Cersei Lannister returned not with an army, but with something more dangerous, Tywin Lannister's gold and fury. Word came from the Riverlands. Tywin had burned villages, hung Tully men from trees, and moved toward Harrenhal. Jaime Lannister rode with him, cutting through Westeros like wildfire. The war had begun. Ned could not ignore the threat. He sent Lord Beric Dondarrion and a host of Northern and Riverland soldiers to defend the Tullys. His daughter Arya begged to go, to fight, to learn. But Ned refused. "You are not a sword," he told her. "You are my heart." In the shadows, the people of King's Landing began to murmur. Food grew scarce. Soldiers demanded taxes. Refugees flooded the gates, and whispers returned. "He's a Stark, not a king. Better a lion than a wolf. He doesn't belong here." Meanwhile, Sansa had changed. No longer weeping over Joffrey, she moved with silence, listening like her sister, watching like a hawk. She had begun to understand what it meant to be a player, not a pawn. But the greatest threat still lay across the sea. Daenerys Targaryen had sent no more letters, but her ships had sailed, her dragons had grown, and with her came a hunger older than thrones. And Ned, he stood alone, surrounded by fire, snow, betrayal, and prophecy. For every day he wore the crown, a piece of him faded. He had wanted justice, but King's Landing wanted blood. Winterfell was no longer just a memory. It had become a dream, a life Ned Stark could barely remember. Every corner of the Red Keep smelled of sweat, blood, and whispers. He missed the crisp snow under his boots, the silence of the Godswood, the sound of his children laughing in open air. Now there were only walls that closed in, eyes that followed, and voices that lied. The war was spreading like wildfire. Tywin Lannister, ruthless and cold as the gold he hoarded, had taken her. His men showed no mercy. They burned villages, pillaged towns, and sent a clear message. The crown on Ned Stark's head was not recognized by the West. Worse, Jaime Lannister had begun a deadly march toward Riverrun, threatening House Tully directly. Ned knew he couldn't wait. He had sent ravens to Robb, calling his son to lead the northern banners southward. The boy, just 16, now had a kingdom's weight on his shoulders. Ned remembered the boy's soft cries in his crib, and now he was asking him to be a general. The irony cut deeper than Valyrian steel. Back in King's Landing, things were crumbling from within. The small folk were starving. Grain shipments from the Reach had stopped, thanks to Renly Baratheon's self-proclaimed kingship and his alliance with House Tyrell. Flowers had thorns, and they were now aimed at the throne. Worse still, the gold. Cloaks had begun turning on each other, paid less, fed poorly, and manipulated by what remained of Littlefinger's spies. Some of them sided with the Whispering Lords, who saw Ned as a northern invader. Varys warned him in hushed tones, "King you may be, my lord, but King's Landing does not wear wolfskin well." Sansa had grown still and sharp. She no longer mourned her lost engagement to Joffrey. Instead, she had begun helping Mest Luwin in the Rookery, copying letters, reading dispatches, and memorizing alliances. She had become her father's Shadowhand, perhaps. His most dangerous student, Arya, though, had vanished. One morning, she was simply gone from her chambers. No guard had seen her leave. Her sword, Needle, was gone too. Ned feared the worst, but in his heart, he knew the truth. She was in the city, hunting truths in the dark. But even with everything falling apart, there was no room for weakness. Stannis had landed at Storm's End, declaring it his stronghold once more. His Red Priestess, Melisandre, spoke to the Lords of Light and Fire. Rumors spread that his army was immune to pain, that shadows moved in his camp, that even the night feared him. And then, just as the tension reached its breaking point, Robb arrived. He rode at the front of a northern host, 20,000 strong, the direwolf grey wind howling beside him. When father and son met in the courtyard of the Red Keep, there were no tears, just a solemn nod. A boy who had left Winterfell was now a commander, and his eyes, once filled with wonder, now burned with war. But joy was short. That very night, a letter arrived from Castle Black. A raven bearing the black wax seal of the Night's Watch delivered a single, chilling message. "The dead walk. The wall is not safe. We need aid." Ned stared at the parchment, frozen. The White Walker's old tales meant to frighten children were no longer just myth. He looked toward the fire burning in the hall and felt a shiver run through his bones. Westeros was tearing itself apart in war and greed, while something far worse gathered in the shadows. Now he faced a nightmare from all sides. Tywin Lannister cutting through the Riverlands, Stannis Baratheon calling himself the true king, Renly blocking supplies from the south, Daenerys Targaryen crossing the narrow sea with dragons, the White Walkers rising in the north, and Ned Stark, a man who never wanted power, now sat on a throne of blades with winter pressing in. He had tried to lead with honor, but honor may no longer be enough. The weight of the crown had begun to show on Ned's face. His beard had grayed faster, his eyes lost their warmth, and his voice, once strong and grounded, carried a quiet exhaustion. King's Landing was eating at him, not with blades or poison, but with pressure, whispers, and impossible choices. Robb Stark now sat at the war table in the Tower of the Hand, standing tall beside his father. Together they studied maps covered in ink marks of enemy movements. The Riverlands were bleeding. Tywin's grip was tightening. House Tully was under siege, and Riverrune's fall could split Ned's alliances down the middle. Ned turned to his son. "We ride at dawn." Robb nodded, his jaw clenched, not with fear but with fire. The young wolf had found his teeth, but even as the northern host prepared to ride, a new threat brewed closer than anyone realized. Cersei Lannister, hidden away in Casterly Rock, had not stayed idle. Her words reached old houses through coin and charm. She painted Ned as a northern tyrant, a usurper who forced the Seven Kingdoms to bow before the gods of ice. She sowed fear among the Reach, whispering of stark savagery, of wolves that devoured children and crowned themselves kings. It worked. Renly Baratheon, whose claim was already weak, now had full backing from House Tyrell. He had married Margaery Tyrell, sealing a political union that gave him power, armies, and food. More dangerous, though, was Margaery's grandmother, Olenna Tyrell, the Queen of Thorns. Sharp as a blade and twice as deadly. She loathed war, but hated weakness more. Together, Renly and the Tyrells began marching northward towards King's Landing, back in the Red Keep. Sansa continued her quiet transformation. She spent more time with old scrolls and maps than with silk and songs. She studied the rise and fall of Targaryens, the rebellions, the battles lost due to pride. She stopped asking about Joffrey. She stopped smiling. But Arya had returned. One night she appeared in the shadows of Ned Solar, dressed in rags, dirt on her cheeks, and blood on her sleeves. "They're planning something," she said breathlessly. "In the city, some lords. They're trying to open the gates for Renly." Ned didn't ask how she knew. He just nodded and sent Seer Barristan and Robb to root out the traitors. 3 lords were taken that night to executed, 1 imprisoned. The city had nearly turned on itself. The throne room echoed with silence the next day. Ned stood before the Iron Throne, not to hold court, but to send a message. He had the 3rd Lord Marrin brought in chains before the people, a traitor found guilty, and Ned, for the first time as king, ordered an execution with no mercy. It wasn't the swing of a sword that frightened the crowd. It was the change in Ned Stark's eyes. They no longer hesitated, but just as he tried to restore order, another raven arrived, this one from the Narrow Sea. The sigil, a black 3-headed dragon. Daenerys had landed, not in the Crown Lands, but in Dorne. Prince Doran Martell had welcomed her with open arms. The Dornish long enemies of the Lannisters now supported her claim. They had not forgotten Ilya Martell. They had not forgiven Robert's rebellion. With Daenerys came Unsullied, and dragons, Ned's worst fears had come to life. He stood at the center of a collapsing realm. 5 kings moved against him. Dragons stirred the skies. The dead rose in the north. And his people, once faithful now, watched him with cautious eyes. In the dark of the Godswood, he prayed to the old gods. He asked them if he had done right. He asked them if honor meant anything anymore. But the trees gave no answer, and winter kept coming. The wind had changed. Where once the banners of House Stark fluttered with pride, now they stood firm against a storm of blood. War had arrived in full, and King's Landing had become a dam about to burst. Ned Stark stood atop the battlements of the Red Keep as the morning sun broke over the city. His cloak flapped in the wind, grey like storm clouds, and his eyes narrowed at the distant hills. Renly's army had reached the outskirts, 50,000 strong, backed by the golden harvests of the Reach and the cunning of House Tyrell. The city prepared for siege, But this wasn't just about numbers. It was about loyalty. The common folk murmured of hunger, the nobility whispered of alliances, and some even dared say aloud, better a king of roses than a wolf in the south. The tension in the air was like drawn steel. Ned had no time to play games. He summoned his council. What remained of it? Sieur Barristan stood loyal at his side. Varys slithered in with his half-truths, and Sansa young, but sharper than anyone, Expected sat quietly, offering advice that dripped with calm calculation. "We can't fight everyone," Sieur Barristan said. "We need to break the alliances before they tighten the noose." "We should send terms to Renly," Sansa suggested, softly. "Offer him Storm's End, maybe Highgarden for his wife. Let him think he's won." Ned looked at her. That was Catelyn's voice in her, but also something colder, something like Littlefinger. But before they could send the Raven, the city trembled. A fire broke out in Flea Bottom, a coordinated attack. Someone had paid thugs to burn the grain stores and stir panic. While soldiers tried to put down the flames, riots erupted. Small folk turned on guards, shouting about wolves, dragons, and hunger. By nightfall, nearly 100 were dead, and the Gold Cloaks had refused to intervene. "They're no longer yours," Varys whispered. "You sit on the throne, Lord Stark, but the city has already chosen its next king." It wasn't Renly they were turning to Dot. It was Daenerys. Ravens confirmed it. She had entered Stormland's territory, joined with House Baratheon loyalists, and her dragons had been seen from the skies, breathing fire. Small folk believed her a savior. Lords saw her as the future. "She is fire," Sieur Barristan said quietly, "and she's bringing the old Targaryen vengeance with her." Ned felt his breath slow. He had tried to rule with peace, with law, with honor. But what use was law when everyone answered to chaos? Then came the unthinkable. A raven from the wall. The Night's Watch had fallen. Castle Black had been overrun by creatures that no longer bled. Samwell Tarly, the last voice from the wall, wrote in shaking hand, "Jon is gone. The dead are coming." We held as long as we could. The North wasn't safe. Nothing was. Robb urged his father to ride north, to defend their home. "Let the Southern kings fight over bones," he said. "The real war is in the snow." But Ned shook his head. "If the South falls, the North will follow. We cannot run." That night, Ned Stark sat in the throne room alone. He looked up at the Iron Throne, not with pride, but with weariness. He remembered Robert's laugh, Catelyn's quiet strength, Jon Snow's questions, and the way Arya used to laugh when she beat Bran in archery. Now everything was ash in his mouth. A king who never wanted the crown. A kingdom that no longer wanted him. He rose slowly, sword in hand. There were choices left to make. He could not save everyone, but he could choose which battle to fight and which ones to leave behind. The final dawn rose over King's Landing beneath a sky of steel-grey clouds. The city, once vibrant and treacherous, had grown silent like a man holding his breath before the blade fell. Ned Stark knew this quiet too well. It was the silence before slaughter. Outside the city walls, Renly's host waited like a tidal wave. His banners of green and gold stretched across the hills, a sea of armored men ready to claim the throne by force. From the east, a second storm approached Daenerys Targaryen with her dragons, her Dornish allies, and her relentless purpose. And from the north, far worse, loomed the dead were marching, and the land no longer whispered of winter coming. It screamed it. Ned stood at the center of it all. The last man holding a line no one could see anymore. The night before the siege, he walked the corridors of the Red Keep alone. Memories crept from the stones of Robert's laughter, of John Arryn's calm voice, of Lyanna's tomb and the promises made in blood. He reached the Godswood, knelt before the heart tree, and whispered one name. John. He had kept the secret for years, protected the boy, lied for honor, lied for love, and now the truth needed to rise. He summoned Sansa and Robb before dawn. You must both listen, he said. When this city falls, and it will, you must go north, not to Winterfell, to the Wall, to what's left of it. Sansa's voice trembled. But what of you? I will hold them, he said, as long as I must. Robb stepped forward. You don't have to stay. I do. Ned looked at his son, eyes steady, because someone must tell her, someone must face her. Asterisk, asterisk, by morning, Renly had begun his assault. Arrows blackened the skies, siege towers moved through the smoke, and men screamed as fire met steel. But the gates of the Red Keep did not fall, not because they held, but because the sky caught fire. A roar unlike anything the world had heard in centuries shook the earth. Drogon descended from the clouds, his wings blotting out the sun. Then came Rhaegal, then Viserion, 3 dragons, 3 shadows of death. Raining flame upon men and city alike, Daenerys had come. Renly's army broke apart in chaos, and within hours King's Landing was in flames. In the throne room Ned waited. He wore no crown. He held no sword. Only truth. When the doors burst open and Daenerys stormed in with blood on her boots and fire in her eyes, she looked not like a savior, but a storm given flesh. You took my throne, she said. Ned stood slowly. I saved it. She raised an eyebrow. He reached into his cloak and pulled out a scroll. The truth of Jon Snow, his birth name, his mother, his father, your brother, Rhaegar. She didn't blink, but her hands tightened. He is your blood, and he is the heir. The silence was deadly. I do not care, Daenerys finally said. This throne is mine by fire and fury, not parchment. I know, Ned said. That's why I did not bring him. She stepped closer, looking into his eyes. You're not afraid of death, she said. I've seen enough of it. For a long moment, neither moved, and then she whispered Dracarys. Asterisk, asterisk, the throne room burned. King's Landing fell, but the North remembered. Sansa and Robb fled through secret tunnels, carrying the truth of Jon Snow. Arya met them in the darkness, her face bruised, her eyes unreadable. The Stark children rode into the night as smoke filled the sky. Behind them, dragons screamed. The 7 kingdoms had a new queen, but winter wasn't done. Beyond the shattered wall, the dead marched south, silent and endless, and somewhere Jon Snow, not yet crowned, not yet broken, rode with fire in his blood, and ice in his name. Because in the end, Ned Stark died a king, not for power, but for the last hope of the living.